is impacting baseball's business operations is our next panel. And this is a little different than all the other panels we've done. It's a little bit more on the business end, but Dan did a panel like this last year, and we're looking forward to another one of these this year. Let me introduce the moderator is Dan Migala. Dan's the Chief Innovation Officer for PCG and SportsDesk Media. He's the co-founder of PCG, which is a Chicago-based team marketing advisory firm, and SportsDesk Media, a next-generation digital media analytics and marketing company. His clients include Major League Baseball, the NBA, NFL, NHL, NCAA, and international sports organizations. And I will now introduce Dan, who will introduce the panelists.
Thanks, Mark. Hey, thank you. So as Mark said, welcome to Moneyball for the other side of the hallway. Right? Is that a fair analogy? Max was here last year and certainly remembers, what we dove into. What do you think is harder, spending money on players or bringing in money that the GMs can spend? Right? So these are the guys, and we're the guys that really make that happen. I'm going to introduce. Briefly, John Fisher, Vice President from the ticketing side for the Arizona Diamondbacks, and Ryan Gustafson, Vice President of Analytics for the San Diego Padres in a minute. But I want you to pause and think for a second. 5 years ago when Vince and Mark launched this wonderful analytics gathering, there wasn't a lot of topics really around the business side, right? It was really around this emerging trend of sabermetrics and analytics on the baseball side. Fast forward to today, we're going to dive into Major League Baseball, an overview, kind of the state of the state, dive into some of the things that these wonderful guys are doing in their teams. And I'm actually going to give you a peek into also minor league baseball and how analytics are being used to sell tickets even at the grassroots level to be able to do it. And then fast forward 5 years from now, where we'll be, where the jobs will be, how that'll impact the correlation between revenue generation and player payroll, right? Like when you think about John, we're going to hear, is challenged with a higher ticket sales budget because of the Greinke signing, how those correlate with each other, and how you can use analytics on the other side of the hall to solve those problems. So the mindset I want you guys to get in for this session is, we like to say in our office, whether it's a Major League Baseball client, an NBA, or an international property, things now move at the speed of digital, right? So like think about that, not in just terms of data collection, but for the next hour in revenue generation. So think about the journey of the fan, which we're going to hear from Ryan, and things like a ticket, how you buy a ticket and how that's correlated with digital, and then how that gives us access to more data to analyze, create more opportunities. Was at the Cubs game yesterday and was talking with Crane Kenny, the president of the Cubs, and we were even talking about parking as another channel that now becomes digital, that you can collect data against that, which leads to incremental revenue opportunities, which leads to increased payroll. So tickets, parking, concessions, sponsorships, right? They're all going to look different 5 years from now. And really, it's this kind of collection of dialogue that's driving that's going to lead to that extra 20% of revenue that hopefully is going to generate a greater payroll. So pause for a second and think about what we've learned the last 3 days on the baseball ops side. Data and digital really allows us to do a couple things from a process standpoint. Number one, right? It allows us to solve a problem. If you have a problem on the baseball ops side, we need to get more guys on base. How do we create a mathematical formula that determines that? And then how do we make informed decisions around that? That's one path that those guys go through. The other is, how do you see something that no one else does? How do you be opportunistic in the sense of creating a new white space to increase a competitive advantage? So that's exactly what these guys do on the other side of the hall. So when you've learned words like and phrases the last couple days, obviously WAR, OPS, that's all part of our vernacular. For us, things like CPA, CRM, right? That's part of our vernacular. So CPA is a cost per action, how much we need to spend to get a fan to do a particular action. CRM is customer relationship management, which is a software system that's internal. So it's the same process, right? We're creating this new alphabet soup that maybe 5 years ago didn't exist, right, guys? But now is part of our daily lives. But uniformly, whether you're Theo Epstein or somebody that's on the business side, what's the result you want? You want an ROI that is positive on that player acquisition. You want an ROI for the ticket sales strategy, and that's the universal language. So all on the same page, whether you're on the right or left side of the hall, all trying to get to that same result. So for today, in the hour plus that we have, we're really going to round the bases, I think, here of analytics on the business side, give you guys a real tutorial on it. First and foremost, we're going to give you kind of a state of the state. We worked with the commissioner's office. There's a new commissioner, obviously, in Commissioner Manfred, and they've been incredibly supportive of this event and Vince and Mark's efforts to really educate the community more on analytics. And we're going to give kind of a state of analytics on the business side, a look into where the jobs are, how that's informing decision-making on the team side from the business standpoint. Then I'm going to turn it over to Ryan as we round first base, and we're going to talk about the analytics and how it plays into the customer journey, the relationship that a team has in the journey of the customer relationship. We're going to hit second base and turn it over to John and talk about what do you do and how do you use data to actually serve and retain those customers. So, right, we're going from player development, right, which is what Ryan's doing, into player retention. And then I'm going to give you a look at some of those incremental revenue opportunities that I think data is creating that maybe 5 years ago was impossible and what we could do. So let's jump in. We worked with Major League Baseball. We did a survey, to look at where some of the jobs are, right? So we surveyed actually a total of 19 clubs out of the total population, and we started to get all of this information. And what we saw was, look at a dedicated business analytics department and the correlation of it. Where does that sit? Does business analytics sit under marketing, combination, IT, finance? John can point to this. Saw a lot of ticketing, right? The mass challenge of ticketing and how you create all those different touch points. I think if you looked at this 5 years ago, safe to say it would have been zero. So you start to kind of see what's happening on the baseball operation side has a correlation to what's happening on our side. So dive that a little bit deeper. Of the 19 teams that participated in the survey, less than half of the clubs have a dedicated business analytics department. So you want to know where the jobs are going and where the path is, I think 5 years from now, Vince and I were talking about this offline, I think 5 years from now you'll see 100% of this, safe to say. Is that a bold prophecy?
Let's hope so.
Yeah, exactly, for these guys, right? We need jobs. They have mortgages, so to be able to do it. But what's interesting is probably a lot like where you saw the baseball operation side 5-10 years ago. Are they just kind of off on an island in baseball ops? Are they under scouting? Are they under player development? Do they have view access into all areas? And look at kind of where it's divided. 10 reported into other departments, 3 flow directly into ticketing, right? Ticketing is the heartbeat of any professional team. 2 into finance, 2 into IT, 1 into marketing. So we're still in this kind of unique evolutionary phase, a little bit of a Wild West, but we're also seeing greater dependency on it. So this same, thought, where are the priorities, right? Where do they want to start? So what is the business problem that Major League Baseball and the individual teams want to solve? The number one, the universal one, is the notion, again, we heard that phrase CRM as one of our war-like analogies. It's a customer relationship system that you need to create a database of all your customers. So just like 15 years ago when Theo and Jed Hoyer and all those guys at the Red Sox created the Carmine database, right? You're seeing that same movement on our side of the hall to create a mass database of everyone that's bought a ticket, everyone that, to use that Cubs example, that's parked, everyone that forwards a ticket electronically to a friend, and how you start to use that data becomes very important. Some of the other things that these teams are starting to really use it for is ticket pricing. Ticket pricing looks a lot different than it did 5-10 years ago. You could probably go to 81 different Diamondbacks games and probably see a different ticket price on every one of them, like an airline seat, right? Whereas before, it all looked the same. So all of those data points, and maybe we can get into that from a question standpoint at the end of this session, all of that starts to really impact of what it is. So look at all those other things, and all this stuff really matters when you think about revenue as it correlates to payroll, sponsorship, merchandise, anything marketing related analytics. And then I love this, and this is what Ryan's really going to delve into with the Padres, lead generation scoring, right? What's the goal of a team on the baseball side? You want to score as many runs, you want to generate a lead, and it's the same thing for him and his staff in San Diego. How do you identify potential ticket buyers and find leads for new ticket buyers so the payroll can grow for AJ? Right? That's what we want. And how does analytics come to play in business decisions? Pause and really think about 10 years ago. If you surveyed GMs of where does analytics lie on their decisions for player personnel, their decisions for any kind of trade decision or acquisition, this slide I think would look pretty much just like this. Just one or two teams are saying extremely influential. You've got a greater proportion, say very influential, about half are moderately influential, and then some, slightly influential. So when you set ticket prices, when you set to decide what type of fan you're going to feature in an ad campaign, all of those analytics are starting to play, whereas before maybe it was a hunch. Of like, oh, this is, we always have ticket buyers from this side of town, and you can start to change that story. And this is coming, obviously direct from those teams. Obviously, ownership drives decisions, right? So John Henry really got behind it, really at that modern first wave of what Boston did, and is really part of the turnaround of the early 2000s. So look at how this starts to relate, right? Where ownership starts to look at it. 11 clubs said, more than half, said that ownership management groups were extremely very supportive of data analytics. So they're seeing the value on the baseball side. These guys are kind of writing the rules of what's possible on the business side and how you can start to kind of change that. So you're going to see more and more of this. What this means as a baseball op, what this means as a fan, you're going to see a complete evolution of how your team markets itself. And I think as we get towards the end of this first session on Major League Baseball, and I'll turn it over to Ryan after this, it's also the challenge for these guys is, they're like the town crier, all of these facts and all this information of what's possible, and how do they go tell that story to other department heads? So if they see something that is a great lead, a great opportunity, it's also the ability of getting it across to other employees. So what this slide shows is the level of comfort that other employees feel. And look at that. Look at that one that's off the charts. They're still moderately comfortable, right? So if you've been running a department on the business side for a Major League Baseball team for 15, 20 years, it's no different than what we saw on the baseball ops side. It's going to take some time to get used to this new information, but then you start to look at the employees that are starting to consume all of these business analytics. You're seeing that more than 20 within an organization are really starting to go through. And I would say on the business side, we have 5-6 departments, I'd say consistently, probably on average, depending on each team. So that's roughly 4 people, probably in each department, that are really starting to use analytics to inform decisions, which I would say 5 years ago wouldn't have happened. And then obviously, one last slide, the outputs, right? I think this is really interesting, and I think Commissioner Manfred's leadership in this area is really going to trickle down. Major League Baseball shared with me, just as an example, you'll see these automated reports, right? So what are the outputs on a daily basis from a revenue standpoint that are distributed? 5 years ago, the commissioner's office would distribute 4 different revenue data points a day and different analysis. This year, with Commissioner Manfred's leadership, increased emphasis on business analytics, 68 different points of data are being distributed on a revenue standpoint daily. And that analysis, right, is constantly looking for that competitive landscape, how that correlates to it, and what's possible. So on this point, right, gives you a good survey of the land, how far we've come. That's a real broad-based view. But doesn't that feel like history is somewhat repeating itself of what we saw on the other side? I think for those in the audience that have a baseball analytics pursuit, or to be able to marry that skill set with what these guys are doing, it's a real interesting wave to be able to ride and think about. So I'm going to pass first base. I'm going to turn it over to Ryan to come up here. What I'd pause and remind you of, we've got the note cards in the back. If you guys want to submit a question, we'll go all the way on that slide around to home, and then we'll open it up for questions. So think about some questions that you have, and I'll turn it over to Ryan from the San Diego Padres to really start to talk about the customer journey.
How you doing, everyone? It's cool to be here. I said this last year when I spoke, but I was a student sitting in your seat back in 2012. So I think it's a cool opportunity to be here. I was actually, when I was in business school, really wanted to get into baseball ops. I'm sure as a lot of you are. Like Dan said, a lot of the opportunities that are coming along are on the business side, and whether there's different hallways or not, it's one organization, and it's a lot of the impact work that is to be had is on this, on the business side. So as I was going through my job search of what I wanted to do, it was quickly evident to me the opportunities that had on the business side, similar to what was on the baseball side a few years prior. And we're just really scratching the surface. I was saying this yesterday I was in Boston, and I was saying this to a few my counterparts in baseball, is that we've probably only done 10% of what we could do over here. And just to think about the opportunities is, to enhance our fan experiences, but also to help our baseball side generate more cash to hopefully spend on players. It's a pretty awesome opportunity. But I appreciate you guys having me here, and hopefully I'm going to stay pretty high level with some of this stuff, but I'll obviously answer questions and can dive into more detail at any point too. I wanted to start just by giving a high-level overview, and I don't know if you can really actually see this or not, but of kind of what the data structure looks like on the business side. So each and every person that comes and buys a Padres ticket, we need to collect data on those people so that we can enhance their experiences while they're at the game, but also tailor some of our sales and marketing efforts to drive more incremental revenue. Last year when I spoke a lot about how we use analytics to renovate our ballpark. We're in the middle of a huge renovation of our ballpark, and we've used a lot of analytics to decide where and how to invest that money. And I also spoke about ticket pricing. But this year, this has been a big focus of ours because of the All-Star game and kind of the surge in customer interest that we had based on the All-Star game, but also the off-season that we had last year. And some of the players that we acquired. So we put a lot of emphasis on how we maximize that opportunity, how we can use data and analytics to bring new customers into the fold, but then analyze all the data that we have available to them to kind of optimize our efforts on the sales and marketing side to drive incremental revenue. So when a customer gets acquired, like Dan was saying, the lifeblood of our organization on the business side is our CRM system. So anytime someone buys a ticket, they get an account built in our CRM system, and we start collecting data on them, from demographic data to their ticket purchase data, both through Padres.com and other channels. We start understanding what they're doing when they're at the ballpark, and really try to get what we like to call the buzzword a 360-degree view of the customer and what they like. So how can we use analytics to tailor experiences that are going to make their time at Petco Park more fun and get them to want to come back more? Once they're in our CRM system, we have a couple different tracks of how we use analytics to bring the customer along the journey that we want to bring them on. We start by segmenting the customers, so based on their demographics or their purchase history or whatever it might be. Each customer is different. Some customers are more family oriented and want to have experiences to bring their kids out to the ballpark, while some might be 24-year-old living in Pacific Beach and likes to come to our beer fest, whatever. So we need to figure out how to tailor messages to those types of customers so that we're not sending a bunch of offers that a customer really isn't going to be interested in. We also have a lot of predictive modeling around customers through lead scoring. Dan mentioned this briefly, but similar to what on the baseball side, when analysts predict a player's performance, we kind of predict a customer's performance. So what do we think this customer is going to be worth to us? The lifetime value of them, their likelihood to buy season tickets, and we try to use that to optimize our sales and marketing resources. So I'm going to talk about that one mostly in depth because it's a really cool thing we've done the last year. And then lastly, hopefully when they buy season tickets, we do a lot of modeling on how their likelihood to come back and what we can do to influence their decision to stay with a fan of the Padres and a customer of the Padres. I think John's going to talk a lot about that, but we do a lot on once we have gotten the customer into the fold as well. Lead scoring. So this is a cool thing that my team did this year, and I will take zero credit for doing this because I have a lot of people that are a lot smarter than me working for me that did this. But we built a new model using a lot of statistical techniques that basically tries to take and figure out what a customer's likelihood to buy season tickets from us. And not only their likelihood to buy, but what they're going to buy. And how we can then funnel that to our sales staff to optimize the opportunity for them to buy season tickets. We start with a cluster analysis, so we divide all the customers into 6 different distinguishable clusters, and then a model is built for each one of those clusters to say what drives that behavior. Is it their distance from the ballpark? Is it how many games they went to last year? Is it their demographic information? There's a lot of inputs that go into this model that predict someone's likelihood to buy season tickets, and then we actually distribute them to sales reps in a way that maybe a certain sales rep sells to a certain type of fan better. And we can actually take data and figure out which of our sales reps should call a certain customer because we know that they're better at establishing rapport with them. This is a really analytically rigorous technique. It takes in data from the last 3 seasons on all of our calls, and it automates and the model recalculates every night. And there's an iterative, we call it an iterative draft. So we distribute leads to our customers in order of priority, which is, again, all an automated system. So a sales rep comes in the morning and they have the 50 best leads that we think that they're going to call on, and then they go about their business and don't really know on the back end how we got to that. But it's been a really successful thing for us. It's new, but it's a way for us to optimize our resources and use data to try to drive customer behaviors and get them to be customers of the Padres. I touched on segmentation a little bit. I wanted to show at least one cool visual. That's a map of San Diego. Heat maps. Everybody loves heat maps. So we segment our customers based on their demographics to basically figure out what type of fan they are. Are they a younger, with less income? Are they an older San Diego lifer who's a Padres diehard? Or are they someone that is a family-oriented customer? We put them into segments based on their demographics, and it allows us to target messages to them. So again, I used the example earlier. We'll send one message to one fan because we know that they are a family-oriented fan and they're more likely to respond to a certain message than another. And we can really target a lot of our marketing efforts instead of using the retail example, which I think is a good one, with like Nordstrom. If I buy a certain type of clothes at Nordstrom, or they know that I'm a certain type of demographic, they're probably not sending me ads on women's shoes. So we don't like to send ads and marketing messages to fans that we know they're not going to respond to. And this is like, we're very in the infancy of this, but this is a big thing for us as we continue to gather more and more data on customer behaviors, how we can build segments within segments and really target messages and really try to figure out how to use every marketing resource to get our fans to come out to more games. So what's next? Like I said, we've kind of just scratched the surface of what we can do here. Enhancing data collection in CRM from everything that a customer does when they get to the ballpark, what type of beer they like, what type of food they like, what games they come to versus which games they sell on the secondary market. When they come to the games, what's their experience like? What are they saying about us on social media? There's this whole realm of data. We've done, as an industry, a really great job of gathering data on the ticketing side, and that's where this has lived. And I think to Dan's point earlier, this business analytics function has lived within ticketing because that's where the data was. Now, as we start to expand our capabilities of gathering data on customers, this becomes a business-wide initiative. I report to our team CEO and president, so we've kind of expanded what used to be a ticketing function into a whole organization-wide function. So how can we integrate this data into our business processes to make sure that each and every fan is having the best experience they can when they come to Petco? And again, furthering of our segmentation analysis to target our marketing efforts. And once we get a fan into the funnel, and they become a customer of the Padres, how do we keep them around and engaged and having a great experience with us? And how do we use data to further that experience and hopefully make them lifelong customers? So I'm going to toss it over to John. I think he was going to talk a little bit about what they do once a customer is a season ticket member of theirs, modeling techniques they do to keep them around, and some strategies they've done on that side.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Dan. Dan touched on it. It's amazing to see where we are when it comes to analytics and data on the business side. And it was just a few years ago where we had one person basically running CRM and making sure that everything was functional, but we didn't use it as a resource. We just wanted to make sure that it worked, that the reps could see who their leads were, who they needed to call next. But in the last 2 to 4 years is when we've really dove deep into all of our data and our analytics, and it's really served us very well. And it's interesting when you look at the similarities as well. A lot of what Ryan just spoke to are things that we do, and a lot of what I'm going to speak to are things they do as well. So there's a lot of crossover and consistency, and it's going to be a continued area of growth in the future as well. It's only a matter of time that we go from 4 people in our analytics team to 5 or 6 in the next couple of years. I wouldn't be surprised if in 10 years that is 12, 15 people deep, because we're seeing the success and we're growing it and starting to use it in other areas of our business. Dan also mentioned Zach Greinke. We like to call December 4th Greinke Day. That's when we signed him. It was around 6 o'clock local time that evening, and it was around 10 o'clock Saturday morning that myself, my boss, and our CFO got an email from our owner saying we need to increase ticket revenue. So we are now expected to increase revenue at the highest level in tickets since the World Series in 2001. So when you look at data, it is really critical to what we do, because things like signing Greinke to a $206.5 million contract certainly impacts us on the business side. So that means we have to be that much more effective, that much more efficient. We don't have a lot of room for error, and we need to maximize all the opportunities that we have. Now, over the years, using a lot of strategies that Ryan touched on, we've done a really good job on the proactive side of our business with new season ticket sales, group sales, suite sales. Those are all at some of the highest levels we've ever had. But a really big opportunity for us continues to be retention. And how do we keep our customers? So we've traditionally had a model that you see across all of sports, where a season ticket service rep might handle anywhere from 400 to 600 accounts. Some cases it's a little less, some cases it's a little bit more. And the responsibilities are that those individuals create strong relationships with their accounts. And we hope those relationships continue to drive high renewal rates. And even if the team is playing poorly, that relationship and that interaction is going to want someone to continue to come back because they feel like they're part of the family. And it's worked. It's been effective for us. Our renewals have been consistently in the low 80 range, maybe a bit of a dip if we don't play well, a bit of a spike if we do play well, but we can lock in something in the low 80s pretty much every year. So as we know, because I mentioned we need to drive a higher retention rate, we started to look a lot more closely at this part of our business probably 18 to 24 months ago. And what we knew, which is obvious, is tenure is a really important factor. And we looked at all sorts of things, and I'll hit on those in a moment, but tenure is ultimately what's going to drive someone to stay here longer. And it makes sense. If someone is here 5 or 6 years, they've been through good years and bad years, chances are they're going to stay. Someone in their first year has a greater likelihood of dropping their seats after that first year than coming back. But the real aha moment was looking at these numbers. So if you look at Alex and you look at Carter, their account base is a little bit longer term. They also have a few accounts in the kind of 3 to 5 range, and you see renewing at 89 and 85% is very strong. This is also going into 2015, which in 2014 we lost 98 games. We were the worst team in baseball. So if there's ever time for someone to drop their tickets, it's after a season like that. Now looking at Noelle, she's almost at 87%. Okay, seems consistent. She has a lot of longer-term accounts as well. Well, Alex and Carter were in their roles for about 3 or 4 years. Noelle was in her role less than 6 months during this renewal period. So with that, does that mean that the relationship that we have is as important as we originally thought, or is it really, really about tenure? So this was the aha moment where we figured out, you know what, it's probably not necessarily, generally speaking, a relationship with that one individual rep. It's more that relationship with the organization. They want to make sure they can call and get to someone quickly, that they still feel part of the family, but that doesn't necessarily mean they have to know Alex, they have to know Corey, they have to know Jamie. And Noelle's renewal percentage here is what kind of allowed us to figure out that tenure is definitely really important. So let's change our approach, and let's have a model now that is based on tenure, and let's scrap the old traditional model that we used to use. So now we've put all of our accounts into these different pods, as we call them. And these are all based on our research, our analysis on when we see changes in renewal behavior. So first-year accounts, again, because those are so volatile and because there's such a likelihood that they're going to drop, we have a high focus only on first-year accounts. Years 2 to 4, we still have a strong focus, but it's a little bit less. If you see, we have the 2 accounts, or 2 reps for 450 accounts, and then 5 plus, because we know those folks are here for the long term. We can have a lot of accounts with only 4 reps because our interactions there are different. I'll hit on that in just a second. And then we have our premium accounts as well. Now, premium, whether it's first year or a first-year account that was with us in 1998, we put them all into one bucket and treat them the same because of the level of spend that they have. But what this allows us to do is create different tactics. So for first-year accounts, the tactic is really about education. And our goal is to make sure that as a season ticket holder, they're prepared for what they face. And realistically, having 81 games is a lot of games. And even if they're a season ticket holder with the Suns or with the Cardinals in the NFL, it just doesn't translate to 81 games in a 13-game homestand. So we want to educate them on being prepared for a homestand. Think well in advance on how to utilize your tickets. We want to make sure they know all the tools that they have to be able to manage their tickets. They can exchange tickets, they can redeem tickets that they may have not used for a game for a future game. Things like that that's going to allow them to get the most uses as possible. We also want to start introducing the other benefits they have, but knowing that just the general understanding of being a season ticket holder is what's most important for year 1. Years 2 through 4 in that second pod, while the education continues, the tactics there is really about engagement, a deep level of engagement. How do we really get them involved with all the benefits that they have, all the events that we have, just really starting to be part of the fabric and having a fun time as a season ticket holder now that they hopefully understand how to manage their tickets. Then for the 5 plus bucket, the tactic there is really just continued maintenance to make sure we're there as a resource when folks need something, but it's also about recognition and appreciation. You know, these are people who have been with us for a long time, and we want to make sure we understand that and we appreciate it, and we show that they provide a lot of value for us, and we want to make sure that we're taking care of you. But there's less interaction that's needed there as compared to the earlier 2 pods. So this has been a bit of a risky approach. It's a complete change from, again, the traditional setup with this part of our business, but we figured that we needed to take a chance and do something different to hopefully encourage a higher renewal percentage, knowing that if we just stayed with our old model, we would typically be in that low 80 range. If we can even move this a handful of points to a higher percentage, 85, 86, that has significant financial impact, so it's worthwhile. And so far, the results have been solid. The next step is how do we make things a little bit easier for the sales reps? How do we put them in a position to be successful? So Ryan touched on this briefly, but we do a lot of retention scoring just like we do with lead scoring that he discussed. And what we want to do with retention scoring is basically project out where we think everyone's going to finish and what percentages they'll renew on. So that is helpful when it comes to budgeting and setting goals, but it's also important because now it allows direction for the sales reps on who they need to engage with, who are the fence sitters, who's low risk to renew, who's high risk to drop their accounts. So some of the things that we look at here, again, tenure is very important. Also ticket usage throughout the year. What kind of a season ticket holder are they? Is it full season, half season? Is it the third season? What's their click-through rates on the emails we send? Are they opted into our text program? What's the annual household income? Live Analytics is a branch of Ticketmaster that helps with lead scoring that we utilize. So we look back at their scores, and then do they work closely with MLB being a registered user, and are they a shop purchaser? So the results that we saw are pretty outstanding. The straight line is showing where renewal percentages should be, and we've put all of our accounts into these different categories. For example, from the 40 to 55 range, there could be 1,000 accounts that are projected to renew somewhere in that vicinity, whereas the 0 to 5 is a small number of accounts, 95 to 100 is a small number of accounts. So this has allowed our sales reps to look at where each account is projected to renew and make a decision on where they need to put their focus. If it's a lower percentage, under 20% or above 80%, probably a good chance they're either going to come back or they're not going to come back. It's not to say we're not going to spend time with those folks, but our real focus needs to be in the middle on the fence sitters that are around that 40 to 60%. So if you look at the straight line that projected where renewal should be, if you look on the lower end, besides a few outliers, we are pretty much spot on. If you look on the higher end, 80 plus, we are pretty much spot on. But if you look at the actual results in the middle compared to what was projected, we increased the actual renewal rate. So our ability to project who was a fence sitter allowed us to focus more energy on those accounts, which in turn has allowed us to renew them at a higher level. So the analytics and all the data that we put into our system worked and has paid extremely high dividends. The other interesting thing on the pod side, if we look at just pod by pod, the projections, again, were almost spot on with the actual results. If you look at our 5-year plus, 87% was projected. We came in at 88. If you look at the middle pod, again, a lot of our fence sitters were in that area, years 2 to 4. So that's where we put a lot of our focus, a lot of our energy. We actually renewed it at a higher rate than what was projected. Our first-year accounts, the same thing. And our premium accounts were literally spot on, the actual percentage from what we projected. And then the fifth category is just a lot of our smaller accounts that our entry-level sales staff handles. That's a small number of accounts, so it's fairly insignificant. But it was remarkable to look back at what was projected for renewals and then how our tactics, how our initiatives actually impacted the final results, and how by identifying the fence sitters, we're able to use specific tactics and focus on those accounts and get them to renew at a higher level than what was projected. So this is just a duplicate slide, so we'll move on from there. Dan?
So you kind of start to see the story there, right? I mean, it's fascinating, on the baseball ops side, right? We'll talk about that little fly ball that drops and how that makes a difference in a game and run production or all of that. And I mean, look at what John was just talking about of that 80 to 85% movement on renewal is a premium free agent, that's in there. So really think about that correlation and think about these guys and guys like myself that are trying to solve, again, more problems with data and digital and also find more opportunities and how that correlates to revenue. It starts with the littlest thing and really starting to study it. When we get into our fourth and final bucket here, as I lead into this, Ryan, amazing story, right? I forgot about that, and you reminded me of it when you took the podium. 4 years ago, here was a student, right? And presenting in the Case Cup. And really think about that for the students that are here. 4 years later, is a vice president of a Major League Baseball team reporting directly to a CEO. That's a career path moving, again, at the speed of digital. And I think, if one takeaway from this presentation, what John, myself, and Ryan are sharing with you, and you look at that MLB data, that's where a lot of the jobs are going to be, and that's where the opportunities are. So with that, as we get into then how data drives incremental revenue opportunities, I can't help but reflect my first job in baseball. I'm going to tell you some minor league baseball examples of data which are really impressive. I started out with the Kane County Cougars, then a single A team for the then Florida Marlins. And my very first day on the job, the owner of the team gave 5 of us a phone book, and he ripped out pages of the phone book, and he gave it to each of us and said, first one to get into the 100 club gets like a bonus or something. I think we got like $50 or something, and maybe like, you know, a shirt or something. And the 100 club was, could you sell 100 tickets, right? So that was part of your job. We learned early on that everybody's job in the organization was to sell tickets. And I'd never picked up a phone. I'd never sold anything, much like Ryan, who initially wanted to pursue baseball ops. I wanted to be in PR, and I thought that was my path. And when I look at what these guys are doing, was that like an old school CRM system, the phone book, and like ripping it out, right? So, but think about this. I'm going to show you this first example from the Charleston RiverDogs. And minor league baseball team, we've got an analytics platform that we use that's called SportsDesk Media. So Ryan made reference to, you know, like when you go to Nordstrom's and you look at something and then that uses data from your internet behavior and follows you around. Well, that's what we do, but really from a ticket sales and a segmentation standpoint. And look at this RiverDogs promotion. You look at that bottom, I'll explain it. But we sold 1,600 tickets in one day without the use of a human being. And think back to my very first day 20 years ago in minor league baseball. If you could sell 100 tickets in 2 or 3 weeks, you were a hero. And that's really crystallizing, moving at the speed of digital. So how this works and how minor league teams are doing it, they don't have the larger staffs. You'll lay what's known as a pixel on a website, and it's basically the same mechanism that can track you anywhere you go. And I'm of the belief, you look at some of the data warehouses that these teams have, let's be honest with ourselves. Our internet selves probably know us better than we know ourselves. You know, where you go online, what you do, if you've got a Gmail account, keywords that you put in there, and how that's all summarized to your profile, it's kind of remarkable when you start and think about it. So we started to think about how can we use all that information to sell tickets. So the lowly single A Charleston RiverDogs New York Yankee affiliate, they wanted to do a 12-week campaign where we would go after individual ticket buyers. And you now have the ability, because of lead scoring, all of these different efforts, and now the technology, to find people on the internet and actually communicate to them on a mass level, one-to-one. So the image that you see here, and it's actually blinking, right? So it's moving a little bit. The segment that was pulled here was to find moms with kids that lived in a certain zip code that had engaged with a coupon on Facebook over the last week. So you talk about what Ryan was saying, the segment within the segment. And what does the ad say up top? Click for discounted tickets, save money on tickets, opening weekend, whatever the message is. Now, we all know the cardinal rule is you don't want to discount tickets or give them away, but what is mom? We knew that audience would really rally around that message. So she clicked on that, and we created a new package for mom that discounted the ticket, but it bundled it in with larger offerings for it, and we converted. And again, Charleston RiverDogs draw probably about 6,000 people to a game. So to sell 1,600 tickets is pretty amazing. And you think about scaling it up for what these guys can do, it's all of those different departments that we talked about in the beginning. It's using the data to find a new buyer, getting the right message, and then communicating them the way that they want to respond. Here's what you started to see. All of that data then, who's a RiverDogs fan? You could walk the concourse and think about it. You started to realize 55% male. They really own that 18 to 44-year-old. Household income's pretty good. That 2+ children. Now if you could start to serve all different messages to them anywhere they go on the internet, via Facebook, via anything, you start to personalize it a lot more and get a lot more results. So here's what an end report, I use that phrase, remember, our war terms are CPA, CPM, CPC, CTR, cost per action really is what you're trying to do. So that's the most important number, right? So you got on that first day, 1,600 conversions, cost per action was about $11.29 to be able to do it. You would take that math equation every day and continue to repeat it over and over and over again. You know that analogy of 50% of your advertising is wasted? You don't know what 50%? This cuts to the chase, and this is, you're actually able to show a profit off of that, which is what you want to be able to do with all your campaigns. So another team, again, a double-A team this time, the Corpus Christi Hooks, I think this is amazing, of what they were able to do. They just targeted fans via Facebook, but they went after, to John's point, season tickets are hard for the larger commitment. So they just said, could we just go fishing all over the internet and find mini plan buyers to be able to do? They got 765 ticket orders for mini plans. So those are probably 25, 35 game packs that they otherwise wouldn't have sold, that they could go after and find those folks and customize it. And they actually are moving a lot of their media spend, less about billboards and branding. It's more about how to use advertising to go and get dollars. So look at that ROI, right? Just like the guys on the baseball ops side, for every dollar they spend, they want to know how many wins they're going to get. A 248% return on investment. Any business would take those numbers day in and day out. And that's a small minor league baseball team in Corpus Christi. So it's just repeating that process. So as part of the global landscape of this presentation, it's not just the 30 Major League Baseball teams that are doing this, but the minor leagues, 160 minor league teams across the country that are also very integral to the ecosystem of baseball are doing these same channels and efforts to be able to drive incremental revenue. So I tried to think about different business problems as well that we could share. This is an interesting one, and John and Ryan talked a lot about it. What started out as tickets is getting into sponsorship as well. Sponsorship revenue is a substantial revenue stream for a team, whether it's naming rights, billboards, outfield signage, bobblehead sponsorships, etc. Why does a sponsor sponsor a team? Well, they want the audience that team supports or that fan base supports to buy their product or service. So teams, again, moving at the speed of digital, need to hustle at another level. And this was a real interesting analysis last year in Chicago. We worked with a company, Wintrust Financial, and they're a bank, and they had the unique challenge of they sponsor both the Cubs and the White Sox. So pause and think about that. So, and the reason they did it was they wanted to reach Chicago fans, but you think about it, if you sponsor the Mets, do you alienate the Yankee fans and vice versa? So they went all in on both, but they needed to figure out a way, then how could they lead score and acquire new bank customers? So they came up with this promotion that was called You Decide. And what we did was, you can kind of see the creative was we served Cub and White Sox fans with banner ads that says, who's your team? And basically, the amazing thing about this was inside a banner, you can now do surveys. I mean, really think about that. So you can actually interact. You're on baseball, research.com, you're on SABR's website, and there's an ad that pops up, and all of a sudden you can start to answer questions. So are you a Cubs or Sox fan? So it's Cubs. Who's your favorite player? Jake Arrieta, Chris Bryant, whoever. And then, you kind of engage with the ad. Would you like us to participate in a sweepstakes to win a chance to come to a game? Yes. And then you interact with that. And then what happens 2 days later when you go check your Facebook page. There's a Wintrust ad that's starting to follow you around with a Cubs credit card. And the White Sox fan never sees that, so you took something broad and you start to marginalize it. The engagement that they had was phenomenal. And what did they want? They want the same thing that John and Ryan want. They want a database of customers of those people. So this is what the Cubs online profile started to look like last year. 52% male. They're a little older than the RiverDogs fans, 45 and older. Household income, majority 60,000, some college educated. They're a lot more fertile apparently than the RiverDogs. They got 3+ kids. Married. So you start to kind of understand. They've had a lot of free time in October to make babies, right? So the data, the data tells the story. But the White Sox, look a little bit, the same. And then you start to kind of carve it up. And then this is the output of what you saw last year. And here's what's planned for this year. So they each want to find 40,000 Cub fans that they could have carrying that card. They want the same thing for the White Sox. And here's the interesting thing that I think I've learned on some of these programs is, much like what John said, it's the lifetime value of the campaign. I think a lot of us on the revenue side, we thought year over year. Baseball ops don't think that way. They've got a vision of player development. They know the wave that's coming up. So what's happening last year with the bank and the sponsor is impacting what's going to happen this year. And it's a lot more predictive of what that revenue is going to be. And what I would say also, too, that's really interesting is when the baseball season ends, you don't stop being a fan of the team, and you crave almost opportunities to interact. So I think sponsors, and I think this will be something we'll be talking about 5 years from now in this room, have 7 months to, in John's world, it's to sell Chase Bank products for Chase Field, Ryan Petco Park for pet products. They still need to sell their product and service those other 5 months of the year, and data allows you to be able to offer more value. And what does that mean for us? That means more revenue to the teams to generate more revenue for payroll as a result. So you start to think about yourself as a 12-month revenue producer. So we've rounded the bases. We've come full circle, and I think we'll ask some questions. And thank you for the cards. Oh, thank you. All right, John, I think I'm going to send this one first to you on a ticketing side, but how does dynamic ticket pricing impact the pricing or even the positioning to season ticket holders? And maybe explain what dynamic ticket pricing is for those not familiar with it.
Sure. So there was a time when I first came to the D-backs, it was the 2008 season, and we knew that some games had more value than others. So about a dozen of us sat in the room, and we looked at the schedule, and we all kind of circled what we thought those games were. And then we would compare and contrast and determine, okay, those are what we're going to call our premier games, and we're going to increase every ticket $5. And that was it. The whole process took 15 minutes. Now we have a full team of 4 people that dig through so much data. It's incredible. And we will move one particular price range on one particular day if the demand is showing that we should do so. And we look at secondary market as a big part of that, primary sales, what inventory is remaining. So for us, if you're coming to opening day and seeing Zach Greinke make his debut, you're going to spend more than you would on Wednesday, 2 days later, when we play the Rockies at 12:40 in the afternoon. It's just simply attaching what the demand is and what that correlating price is. Much like the airline industry, we've all seen dynamic price in all aspects of our life. It's just relatively new, I'd say, in the last 5 to 6 years to sports, especially baseball. So I think for us, one of the nice benefits with dynamic pricing on the season ticket side is we can really show a great savings because season ticket holders get discounted price off of what the face value is. So if a ticket is $20 when we first go on sale, but then because of demand it goes to $30 and $40 by the time that game is here, well, as a season ticket holder, you might only be paying $16. So now instead of just saving that $4, you're saving potentially $15, $20, $25 and provides a lot of value. So dynamic pricing not just drives revenue for us on the single game front, it allows us to maximize when demand is high. It also allows us to really have a great piece of leverage when we're out there trying to sell tickets, because season ticket holders are saving that much more money now than what they had previously in earlier years.
No, great question. Ryan, I'll send this one to you. How much is an organization spending on business analytics balanced by revenue gains from a better strategy?
Not quite sure I understand, but
so I think the context is,
basically what's the ROI of a business analytics?
The ROI on your job, right? Yeah.
Zero.
No pressure. This is your annual review in front of 100 people.
Just say it's really high.
Yeah,
it's through the roof. No, I think that there's certain metrics that we look at. John mentions pricing, so I'll just go off that one. We can obviously measure the incremental revenue that we drive through our pricing strategy, but there are a lot of other things that we get involved in, financial projections, and we get involved in sponsorship and all sorts of stuff. And the ability to predict our business is a tremendously valuable, almost incalculable value of what we do. Especially when it comes to planning our baseball side. So our ability to know what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, how much cash we're going to generate on the revenue side allows us to plan accordingly, and that's a tremendous value proposition for ownerships and executives. But there are quantifiable parts to it. The pricing one's an easy one, and there are non-quantifiable parts of it. But I think in general, I've been very lucky to work for an ownership group and a team president that believes in the work that we do, and sees the value of it. And again, to John's point earlier, I think it's just going to continue growing as we get involved in more and more sides of the business.
I want to just add something kind of along those lines. What's important to remember in baseball is our local revenues are significantly important. We don't have the big national TV deals that you might see in the NBA, the NFL. So for example, for the D-backs, our ticket revenue and our corporate sales revenue is about 54% of our total company revenue. You won't see numbers like that in the NBA or the NFL. I can't speak to the NHL, but that's why all of this data and driving revenue and being efficient is so critical for us, because the things that we do directly impacts what happens on or off the field with player acquisitions. So if we miss our goals this year and we come in $4 million short, that $4 million needs to be made up somewhere. And it's either coming out of our owner's pocket, or we're going to have to deal with a player that is making something in that range. So this is a really, really big part of our business that impacts the performance on the field, more so than any of the other sports.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. The NFL in particular, while we have counterparts at the NFL that run analytics, at the end of the day, 80% of their revenue gets sent by a check from the NFL, while us, it's almost flipped. So we have such a big canvas to paint on with 81 games and all the inventory we have and all the opportunity we have to really use data to drive the business. So I think it's more important in baseball than it is in other sports.
Yeah, I'd actually say right around a couple times a year, these guys become the GM's best friend. And even if you have a team that gets off to a hot start and wants to do some trade acquisitions, I would say in May, June is when probably a GM is taking you guys out to dinner and saying, where could you pull a rabbit out of a hat and find a couple $1 million so I could do an acquisition? And it's literally, the correlation, you guys bring up a great point compared to the other sports. It literally is that hand to mouth oftentimes, and I think that's what makes the baseball strategies on the business side all the more important. I might actually handle this one, but it's when collecting data on customers, are there concerns on any ethical concerns regarding privacy? So great question. And our company, SportsDesk Media, what we do, actually, we probably have about 200 teams and leagues that we have, again, what's known as a pixel that's laid on a website. And what that pixel gives us permission to do, and you don't realize this maybe sometimes as a consumer, is we can pull about 80 different data points about you and put those into a data warehouse. And it is anything from, because it's important for the sponsorship guys, your grocery store rewards programs, your credit card information, a lot of your search history if you use a Gmail account or use Google, and we put that all into those clusters, and the result of that is what we saw with the Charleston RiverDogs, that moms that use a coupon would engage with an offer and we could sell 1,600 tickets to her. What's really important, I think, to understand from a privacy level is anything that you do in any electronic channel on Instagram, any kind of channel on social media, or even just visit a website that's free, no one ever reads the disclaimers, right? You're giving the permission for third-party organizations like ours to aggregate all that data to be able to do. What's really important to understand, though, is the difference between that kind of privacy concern and the way that it's governed in North America as well as internationally. That's what's known as third-party data. So that mom in Charleston, as an example, or those Cub fans, we don't know their names, we don't know their email address, their phone number. We can tell you their IP address of their computer and everything that they've done, what kind of dog food they just bought last week at the grocery store, as one metric. But it's really that next layer to get into the system of what these guys do at the next layer of, you want to engage. So John Doe, who lives in North County in San Diego, as a very particular person, is the first party. And I believe at that point, the fans are giving their permission for you to engage with them in some type of lead. So if there's anything else on...
Yeah, we never do anything without our fans explicitly giving us permission on certain things. And at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is create better experiences for them. So a lot of the stuff that the data that we do collect outside of just their purchase history is more used in the sense of how can we leverage this to make their experience better for them instead of giving one size doesn't fit all. So what one fan wants is not what another fan wants. So how do we use data to target those experiences? But we have, a few years from now, hopefully the data that we collect will be a lot more robust. But right now we haven't done anything that would, that fan hasn't explicitly given us their blessing on.
All right, I think I got a much lighter question. Both of your guys' teams underwent uniform changes this past season. What impact, if any, did the fans influence these changes, and how potentially did analytics help you design these jerseys?
Yeah, so I can speak to ours, and if you've seen what we have now, it's a combination of 16 or 17 different options. It's very unique to baseball with the way the colors kind of fade off the shoulder, the bottom of the pants, or the back. We've brought back an element of teal, which was very popular here back in the early days, World Series days, and that's been received very well, actually. But it's been interesting because this discussion probably started internally 2 to 3 years ago. It was done very closely with MLB. And you don't want to say it's the kind of Oregon of college football approach, but in some ways it is, where we have a lot of flexibility, we have a little flair, we just have something that's different. And frankly, a big part of it is driving a little more toward the kids and toward the youth and developing that base, because that's very important. And baseball has been waiting for a team to be able to step up and do that, and we're fortunate being a young franchise that we can. If you're the Cubs, the Yankees, Tigers, Pirates, teams have been around for a century, your brand is your brand, and you're not going to make any significant changes. Sure, the Pirates have changed their uniforms over the years, but the core has still been the same. The Yankees just simply can't change their uniforms, the Dodgers. But we're in a situation where we can. So if we're able to take some risks, we're an organization that is willing to do that. We like to try to be innovative and try different things, and at the end of the day, we'll see how this plays out throughout the season. Of course, if we win a lot of games, people are going to love the uniforms. So that's going to make things easier for us. But so far, the response has been solid, and there definitely was a long-term thought process in looking at our fan base and looking at the youth and knowing that this is something we need to do to continue to drive those younger fans to hopefully continue to be D-backs fans in the future and wear our merchandise and buy tickets at some point down the road.
Ryan, any anecdotes from the uniform change?
I think we're going to look a lot more in the next year or so using data on the response that we've gotten. We're in a unique situation because we're hosting the All-Star Game this year, and we have an All-Star Game commemorative jersey. But we did some other stuff, experimenting with brown and yellow color, brown and gold color scheme, and so we'll over the next year we'll be using a lot of analysis around social media feedback and surveys and that type of thing to see what people like and don't like. But again, if you win games, they're going to like whatever jersey you're wearing. So.
Yeah, to that point, we unveiled our jerseys on Thursday, December 3rd, and we signed Greinke on Friday, December 4th. So people liked our uniforms quite a bit. So.
Well played. Explain your club's view of revenue versus attendance. Is it more important to put butts in the seats or maximize revenue?
That's a great question, whoever brought that one up. Our owner and chairman, Ron Fowler, would say both. So I'm going to say both as well. But certainly there's a balance. I mean, I think it goes back to being able to segment different types of customers. I think, Dan, you said earlier that you don't like, it's not a good idea to discount tickets. I agree, but I think it's good sometimes to discount tickets to people who respond to discounts. So at the end of the day, on a Tuesday game against the Diamondbacks in April, we may discount. But a Saturday game against the Yankees that we have coming to town this year, we certainly won't. So there's a balance to be had. There are certain games where we're going to be more focused on driving revenue, and certain games where we're more focused on what we can do to get butts in seats. Because at the end of the day, growing fans it's going to make for a much more long-term sustainable business than just trying to focus and drive every dollar you can.
Yeah, it's certainly both. I mean, they obviously go hand in hand. And then there's the trickle down with concessions and merchandise and all the spends in ballpark, which I can assure you are less impactful than a lot of people seem to think it is. That's always kind of the play. They just want this, that, they sell merchandise. The revenues we get from concessions and merch is nothing compared to what we get in other areas of our business. But it's still ultimately an important thing, and that's why we want to have people in the stadium. Obviously, it also creates an environment in the ballpark when you have a lot of people there that is exciting, and hopefully want people to come back. But at the end of the day, I think where a lot of all of our dynamic pricing and analytics come into play is we're trying to maximize everything we can from the fans that are coming to games. So, for example, as we've started to institute dynamic pricing over the last few years, our total paid number of tickets has actually declined, but our total ticket revenue has actually increased. So we're taking advantage of the opportunities that we do have to drive revenue despite attendance that has declined slightly over the years. So it goes hand in hand. It really does.
Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting too. Again, the business equation, the way the team's lease agreement is set up. There's some teams, as an example, that have certain thresholds of attendance, and once they hit that number, there's a tax that they would pay in terms of rent. So what you see a lot of those teams might do is stay just below the threshold, of where they need to be, but they'll produce higher priced ticketing inventory, of more products that they can maximize their revenue. But that attendance number, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it's the number that you want to maximize, not just the number of tickets sold, but the amount of revenue that you could get. So that becomes part of the equation to be able to do, and every situation is different. And I do agree, that's something that from a fan perspective, I have that debate with my dad all the time, that concessions and parking and everything isn't as great of a holy grail of cash.
That's right.
As someone might think. It's maximizing that ticket revenue is really key.
One more thing to add in terms of attendance, I can assure you our sponsorship department does not want to see attendance decline, because for them, as they're out presenting, they want to have a lot of eyeballs on signage and interacting with our fans. So that's the other pressure that we have in terms of attendance is we want attendance to be high so we can go out there and sell additional partnership deals and sponsor deals. So that's another key thing when it comes to tickets versus revenue. We need to make sure we have a lot of people in the ballpark.
Yeah, but think about Ryan's point too, right? I mean, that Charleston example of people that like to buy on coupons. And if you can find that segment within the segment, and you no longer have to mass market that with an ad in the San Diego Union Tribune that everybody sees, just the 15% of you that would respond to that message are now the only people that are going to see that, and the other 85 are getting a different offer to be able to do it. It's no different than what the airlines do, as well, to be able to maximize it. So that's a great kind of new frontier that I think as teams get smarter and all those data decisions, you could really appease Ron Fowler both ways, right? To maximize revenue and sell a lot of tickets. So a good portion of profits on ticket sales are made on the secondary market. I was expecting this question. Could more accurately pricing tickets by clubs to the market value help clubs capitalize on ticket sales and eliminate the secondary market?
I'm going to take this one because this has been my life for the last 3 years, I feel like. The secondary market exists as it does because of inefficiencies in the primary market, whether it's the way that we price the tickets, whether it's the way that we distribute and sell the ticket brokers, whether it's the process of buying a ticket. Anything in the secondary market, you look team to team and it varies so tremendously. There are teams that sell upwards of 20,000 tickets a game on StubHub, while we sell like 500. So what we try to do is figure out how to optimize our primary business by supplying, maintaining controls of the secondary market and pricing efficiently in a way that's going to drive people to buy through Padres.com as opposed to the StubHubs and SeatGeeks of the world. So I think, again, main point being it exists as it is because of inefficiencies in the way that we run our businesses on the front end. So we try to do everything we can to make it as efficient as possible and eliminate that arbitrage.
What we've always talked about here in Arizona is ultimately a ticket can't get on the secondary market without leaving our primary first, whether it's a season ticket sale, a single game sale. And there's a lot of teams that have worked closely with brokers and have put themselves in very difficult situations. And I think the other thing that we found as an industry is there's different segments of brokers, and you have some brokers that run very large businesses that have tickets spread out across every team, across every sport. And the analytics they do, they're very well thought out in how they operate. Then there's other brokers that are a little bit smaller, and they're the ones that seem to panic. They're the ones that the game is in 2 days, I haven't sold my tickets, I need to do something, so now I'm going to take that $20 ticket, I'm just going to sell it for $4. I just need to get it off my books and try to get something in return. Those are the situations that have crashed the market. Those are the situations that then puts a lot of pressure on us when it comes to primary sales, the values that our season ticket holders have. So a lot of teams now, including ourselves and the Padres, are starting to really limit the number of tickets that are out there with ticket brokers and making sure that if we are partnering with anyone, we're partnering with the right ones that aren't going to crash the market, that understand the impact of what they do on themselves and us. And I think the teams are starting to just get a lot smarter, and they're not looking short term at, great, this broker is going to spend $150,000 and buy 40 season tickets. That looks great on my bottom line and working toward my goals right now. And they're taking a step back and understanding that for the long term, that's not a good decision, and that's going to hurt me. So I think we've all gotten a lot smarter, and Ryan's correct when he talked about the last 3 years. I think as an industry for the last 3 to 5 especially, we've really been diving deep into the impact of the secondary market, and I think we're all getting a lot smarter right now.
John, I think you as really coming up in ticket sales, be a good one to start with you, and Ryan, feel free to chime in on this one. Do you notice significant differences for in-game behavior between season ticket holders and single game ticket buyers?
That's a great question. We don't necessarily have anything specific that we can look at least nothing in place yet. I know there's a lot of app usage now that MLB's developed that we've started to utilize more that would help us, but I think a lot of our information is more anecdotal, and we know that as season ticket holders, they're a little bit more engaged in the product, in the game presentation. The game is important to them. Statistics are important to them. So we try to change our game presentation throughout the course of the week. On Monday through Thursday games, it's more of that core fan base that's coming out to see the Rockies or another opponent that may not be as attractive as some of the top brands. So we'll drive a little more information about the game, about our minor leagues, things of that nature compared to the weekend where we have more of those casual fans that come in. So for us, we might make our entertainment a little more generic. We may have more, fun videos and music and fan contests and things like that. But Monday through Thursday, we try to drive a little more of baseball because we know that's our core fan base. Those are the fans that are really here to support us and watch baseball compared to the weekend where the casual person may just be looking to have fun or see a big brand and just come out to a game. So I think that's the biggest thing that we've done over the last couple of years, but it's definitely an area we want to continue to watch, and if we can find ways to have more physical, actual data, then that would be very helpful for us.
Yeah, I think this is like the next wave of what we're going to do a lot on is trying to enhance the experience by understanding what type of customers like what type of parts of going to a baseball game and really have those micro, unique experiences. I would also throw groups in that. Groups is a huge part of our ticket business, and what we've done and where we have used analytics is understanding group buyers are much more attracted to the social experience of attending a baseball game than a diehard fan. I think most group buyers don't necessarily care about the outcome of the game, more the outcome of the people that they're with having a good time. So we've used that with a lot of our renovations to our stadium about creating those unique social experiences. Instead of sitting in the same seat next to the same person for 9 innings, you're able to create these unique social experiences. But yes, to John's point, I think we're just starting the frontier of understanding the data on how fans experience baseball games and how we can tailor those experiences to make them come more often.
Yeah, so I think that's a great note to summarize and end this great session on. I think we moved to the speed of digital, right? This flew by in the hour 15 that we have. But we talked about in the opening, right? 10 years ago it was baseball ops looking to use data to solve a business problem that they were having and then create a new opportunity. And think about what they just said there at the end, right? Fans come for different reasons. What can we do to solve that problem and serve them with better experiences from the point of how they purchase the ticket to the point of their actual in-game experience? And I love the subtlety of what John said about the secondary question too is a real important one, is the short-term game of selling those 40 season tickets to a ticket broker and really lessening the value of your tickets on the open market versus making the disciplined long-term business decision that's more stable. Very similar to, I think, what you saw maybe on the baseball ops side of, should we sign this free agent that's going to give us a little bump versus can we think more long-term in our approach and really create a defined longer-term business strategy too. So kudos to those guys. Let's give them a round of applause for taking us on the other side of the hall. So we appreciate it, and we'll break now for lunch. Oh no, we got another panel. Okay, sorry. Oh, okay. Wait, there's more. The marketing panel. So
We've got a research presentation now, Jim Albert, component predictions of batting and pitching measures, and then we'll head up to the second floor and we'll have lunch.